and welcome to the Sunday Guardian Show. Today, I'm going to discuss with a very special guest on what the US election means for China and specifically China's political warfare, which is what is the way forward. Now, I have a very special guest for this, Professor Kerry K. Gershaneck, who is an advisor for a US House of Representatives committee that recently investigated the threat posed by China's political warfare. Now, this investigation is the first time ever the US Congress systematically looked into the nature of China's political warfare, the threat, and how well the US government has prepared itself to combat it. Now, Professor Gershaneck is a visiting scholar in Taiwan. Now, among his academic postings, he has been an Asia-West Fellow for Hybrid Threats for the NATO and the distinguished visiting professor at Thailand's, sorry, I may not be able to pronounce it, Chula Chongklau Royal Military Academy and Royal Thai Naval Academy. He is a former US Marine Corps officer. Now, Professor Gershaneck writes and speaks extensively on China's political warfare. He's the author of the book Political Warfare: Strategies for Combating China's Plan to Win Without Fighting. Welcome to the show, Professor Gershaneck.
Honored to be here, Joyeeta. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, now, Professor, if you can, start by talking about this congressional report. What exactly is it? What does it mean? And what does it mean for US's China policy now that Donald Trump is the president of will be sworn in January?
It's a very significant report, Joyeeta. You have to understand that the executive branch of my government, the United States government, has been failing abysmally, at least for the past 4 years, and then prior to the previous Trump administration, very badly for a good almost 25 years, 20 years, failing to recognize how we are being attacked, how we're being subverted, how we're being psychologically manipulated, subverted, and destroyed as a nation by the People's Republic of China. No one on the congressional side, which has a constitutional mandate to oversee the executive side, no one on the congressional side has conducted an investigation to see why it is we're failing so abysmally in this fight. We're not even in the fight. Joyeeta, when you read the report, all 300 pages of it, if you have a free moment this weekend, when you read it, you will be appalled by just the lack of concern, the willful blindness, the elite capture represented in this report that shows that across the board, at least for the last 4 years, there has been almost zero effort to combat China's political warfare.
So when you're talking about it, what were the key conclusions of the report?
Well, the key conclusion after investigating, it was a regular investigation. They held 3 hearings, a number of briefings from 23 out of 25 agencies that were investigated, to include FBI, Department of Defense, Department of State, Department of Justice, National Security Council, which did not step up and distinguish itself during the presentations that it was supposed to give to Congress, and then CIA refused to give any presentation. The point is that the conclusions are, after doing a thorough investigation and getting briefings and working closely for the better part of a year, we have failed as the United States government. We have failed to acknowledge the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. It's a particularly venal nature. And we have failed to recognize that we are really in a Cold War. The current administration is calling it, we're in strategic competition. Department of Defense says that the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China is a pacing threat. No, it's not. It's a Cold War enemy, not by our definition, but by the People's Republic of China's definition. Now, what is it that our government fails to recognize? The nature of the regime, the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, which runs China. That nature is it's expansionist. It's militarily and economically powerful. It is brutally repressive. It's a Sino-fascist, genocidal, totalitarian regime. No one will speak the truth. No one will break out the Merriam-Webster dictionary in the current administration and acknowledge that every term I have just used is justified using Merriam-Webster. Every element of those terms in Merriam-Webster applies to China. But they want to treat it as simply a strategic competitor. Absolutely suicidal nationally. It is absolute abdication of responsibility by those in charge of State Department. I pick out State Department initially because Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, has prohibited the use of the term political warfare in the Department of State. You are not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say that we're engaging in it. That again is an abysmal decision because political warfare is the term that China is using for the war it's waging against us. If you refuse to acknowledge that another country is at war with you, like Osama bin Laden had been at war against the United States leading up to the 9/11 attack, in which nearly 3,000 Americans died very hideous deaths, America at that time was saying, "Oh, we don't acknowledge you're at war with us. We'll pretend you're nothing. You just got a towel on your head and you live in a cave. You're not a threat." Well, suddenly it was a threat. The same attitude, the same arrogance and ignorance, willful blindness is what is driving Anthony Blinken and the U.S. State Department. Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, is pretty much the same way. If you don't acknowledge the threat, the wartime threat that's trying to destroy your country, if you cannot detect it, you cannot deter it, you can't counter it, and you can't defeat it, you're going to lose that war. And that's the path we're on. And that's basically the conclusion of the 300-page report from Congress.
For our viewers, can you give a specific example? Because I'm certain the report must be having thousands of examples. Can you give a specific example so that they understand what exactly is going on?
Okay, well, I'll do that, but I'll first contrast the first Cold War. We're in a Cold War now, but that never really ended. But okay, so when we're against the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, we don't allow communist Russia to entrench itself within our borders, to send massive numbers of Russians illegally over our borders. Many military age. We got at least 3 brigades of equivalent of military age Chinese men that have come across our borders based on our own Department of Homeland Security numbers of the number of Chinese military age men that they first detained and then under the Biden administration let go. Okay, well, if you're special operations forces and you're coming in with your short haircut, and then when they detain them, incidentally, Joyeeta, you'll be appalled at this. When they detain them, a lot of these young men stand at military parade rest. What does that tell you about their
You're
background?
talking
They've got short
about
hair inside America. They're coming across our border. They're getting in through other ways, through Guam, through the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, and the other ways to infiltrate us and infiltrate our military bases. But they're coming across our southern border in droves because the Biden-Harris administration has an open border policy. And so that's why we have a minimum of 10 million illegal aliens that have come into my country that have basically taken welfare using our hospital, all our funding, it basically invading my country at the invitation, basically, of the Biden-Harris administration. About 30,000 of those, we believe, are Chinese, and many of those are military-age men. What does any common sense analysis tell you of what China's doing? They're very good at colonizing through infiltration, through seeding is the term they use, sending in their people. Now they're sending in, Chinese people, which not all of them are bad necessarily, but a lot of military age men. What does that tell you? So they're unlike the first Cold War. We didn't let the Russians do that to us. Biden and Harris administration has let that happen. The infiltration of our institutions, of our businesses, of our academia, universities is pretty stunning, and I can go into more detail on that. Cultural centers are what we call our elites. Elite capture is pretty astounding in our country. We have Harvard University professors basically spying for China. Only a few get prosecuted. We have many universities taking ultimately hundreds of millions of dollars from Chinese entities affiliated, every one of them with the Chinese Communist Party, affiliated with the United Front Work Department. They're taking, to cumulatively hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year and failing to obey U.S. law to report that money under the previous Trump administration, those who failed to report it. Biden, when he came in, stopped making the universities report this foreign influence money that's coming in. Our agencies are there's no whole of government approach on this, of course, but the Department of Justice, for example, you're looking for specific examples. Department of Justice, the first Trump administration has a program to go out and look for those the Harvard professors, look for those who are being recruited by the Ministry of State Security and the Ministry of Public Security and the United Front Work Department. And the China Project, pretty successful. What that program was doing, Joyeeta, was methodically training our investigators, methodically training prosecutors, methodically training key members of our government about the China threat, okay, the PRC threat. What happens when the Biden administration comes in on day one? They end that program. There was no justification for doing it. They were worried. They were subject to the PRC narrative, which is anytime you go after someone from China or someone of Chinese descent, you're racist. Okay, so what they did is they fell for the PRC, the Chinese Communist Party narrative, and they shut down a very effective program that was defending America, protecting us, simply for fear, out of fear, which is a constant theme in this administration, just fear of escalation, fear of offending China. They shut it down for fear, and so we're a sieve now. We are wide open. We have examples of our Department of Transportation where we have cranes made in China. And when the Department of Transportation was called to testify before the committee to give their report, they saw nothing wrong with the fact that those cranes were transmitting data about what's happening in our ports back to China. Oh, that's normal for those cranes to do that. To which the committee members were just dumbfounded. Yeah, are you kidding me? You don't understand what happens when you allow Chinese cranes. You got a good deal on them, right? Yeah, we did. Why do you think that was? Well, because they're spying on us. And the people who sold you those cranes have influenced your business elites, our business elites in America. So those are a couple of examples. The other examples that you might be interested in addition to, is the National Science Foundation. The modus operandi of the PRC is to steal technology. They don't develop it. They don't invest the billions that India invests, that the United States invests in developing, creating advances. They steal it. Okay. So our National Science Foundation has hundreds and hundreds of programs where we're partnering with our Chinese friends. They don't bother to vet those Chinese scientists that are coming in, who happen to be, oh, by the way, in addition to being Dr. So-and-so from the People's Republic of China, you're also People's Liberation Army Colonel so-and-so, or PLA Lieutenant or Captain so-and-so. So this is how, through political warfare, through elite capture, through the propaganda, that the committee has seen example after example of our own officials, Joyeeta, buying into the PRC narrative. PRC has got our U.S. Department of Agriculture convinced that there's no trouble, or it's been convinced up until very recently, there's no trouble with Chinese CCP-related organizations buying up large tracts of land right near our Air Force bases, right near our Marine Corps bases, on Guam, where the military buildup is going on right now. No, USDA doesn't see any reason to regulate that. And all you need to do is see what's happened at some of our key Air Force bases now, in where we house some of our most important Air Force assets. They have drones flying overhead every day that they won't shoot down. Okay. What might those drones be there for? For preemptive strike in case the U.S. has to respond to an invasion of Taiwan. So you get the point. Every agency either completely failed to respond, completely failed to prepare its people to fight this battle, to even detect that it's going on or understand it's going on. And certainly our education institutions in the Department of Defense have failed to do that. Um, our George Shultz Center, our Foreign Service Institute, fails to teach about political warfare, China's political warfare. Our Department of Defense, National Defense University, our Defense Information School, which teaches our strategic communicators, they don't teach anything about China's political warfare. If you don't train your officers, if you don't train your senior civil servants about that threat, they can't detect it, they can't deter it, they cannot counter it, and they can't defeat it. We're going to lose. Those are some examples.
Yeah, and the thing is, you see, now when you're talking about political warfare, in what ways
Uh,
is China's political warfare different from? I mean, it is said that every country engages in some kind of political warfare. How is China different? And what is unique about it? And in terms of, so this political warfare is it laying the groundwork for actual some kind of a kinetic warfare, as you talked about what is happening in Guam and all, and when it comes to Taiwan?
Sure. Of course it is. It's trying to divide, demoralize, and in their terms, disintegrate Taiwan. So it's ready for taking. It's doing the same thing to my country. It's doing the same thing to your country. The 1961 war was a case study in successful CCC political warfare because they led India to believe, into a sense of complacency, to believe they weren't going to attack, and of course they did attack. Well, it's the same thing now. It's the same modus operandi. They're trying to destroy, wear down entropic warfare, which Cleo Pascal, who does a tremendous job writing for you, writes about entropic warfare extensively and beautifully. They're trying to wear down the society. They're trying to wear down America the same way. They wear us down, they distract us, they deceive us. Okay. So uh, if you cannot win, from the PRC's perspective, if you cannot win Taiwan without fighting, okay, it doesn't mean without struggle. Then the CCP understands that the long struggle, prolonged struggle, but without mid-intensity kinetic warfare. They're fine with violence. They're fine with low intensity conflict, low intensity kinetic warfare, people getting killed at that level. Terrorism is part of their political warfare, as part of their active measures, or what they call unrestricted warfare. Everything is warfare to the Chinese Communist Party. There's unrestricted warfare means everything can be weaponized. Tourism can be weaponized. Okay, so we have to understand first their terminology, and then we have to come up with a strategy to defeat it. That's what we have not done. So here's the terrible predicament my country's in right now. Not so much Taiwan, but Taiwan's smaller. My country is in the predicament that we're getting softened up badly in our K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade, in our universities, with a very woke, very anti-America agenda. That China is okay. The kids see TikTok every day, which is TCP owned, and so the subtle influences there that the kids are learning through the very short videos that, oh, Taiwan's always been part of China. And so Taiwan is, it's part of the PRC, and hence America should not go to war, should never ever defend Taiwan. It's part of China. It's been so since ancient times. Same thing with the territory they claim from India that they're trying to take. Oh, it's been China since ancient times. Okay, so you're getting propagandized to get you softened up. The elites are being captured to not want to fight back. Win without fighting really means to win without us fighting back. We just quit. Okay. So they're softening us up, but they certainly will intend it. If Xi has said it repeatedly since 2012 when he took over China. We became absolute ruler a little bit later, but since he took it over, he's been saying, hey, violence, invasion is on the table with Taiwan. We're going to take it. And then if they take Taiwan, then it's the Senkakus. And then it's the West Philippine Sea, the Senkakus from Japan and the Nansei Shoto area. And then it's the Ryukyus, Okinawa, because they
Hmm.
claim all that. And so it's salami slicing. You understand that they're going to take one and then, well, now that we have Taiwan, now South China Sea is historically, since ancient times, been Chinese. We take that. We take the West Philippine Sea. We take all of the ASEAN countries' claims in the South China Sea. Oh no, that's all ours. Ryukyu Island chain, Nansei Shoto. China says it's theirs. So it's incrementally as they go from regional hegemon, which is their goal, they become ultimately the global hegemon because everyone's afraid to stand up to them. And yet America, again, our predicament is we have no strategy, no policy, and no, as the congressional report it reflects, it concludes, we don't have the capacity or the will right now to confront this existential threat that we face.
You have also written on the capture of the media in Taiwan, specifically Taiwan's battle for the cognitive domain, media warfare.
Hmm.
How has
Right.
China captured, when you're talking about the US media and say US media in particular, and of course Taiwan, and as well as media and academia? I think these are the two areas that you are talking about. These are the most vulnerable to Chinese political warfare, or willing victims. Would you call them that?
Well, in addition to the elite capture of our U.S. government officials,
Yeah.
to the point that the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said that he would call his Chinese counterpart and tell him if the president of the United States said to attack China for whatever any reason, don't worry, I'll pick up the phone call and tell you, and I'll call you before we launch the attack. That's treason. Yet, but that's he got away with it. No one's court-martialed him, which as he should have been. But the point is, it's all dangerous. Elite capture of U.S. government officials who refuse to acknowledge the political warfare being fought against us and the threat that it poses to us. Our business community is selling them the rope, to quote Lenin, to selling them the rope that they will use to hang us. They're selling us they're selling the technology. They're selling the farmland next to our military bases. They're selling them all the capability to defeat us. Some of our businessmen and women are doing that. That's part of elite capture. In academia and the news media, it's the same way. You have the most comprehensive, well-resourced propaganda capability in the history of planet Earth under the control of the Chinese Communist Party. They invest billions into in Xinhua, into CCTV, into China Daily. Okay, that's what we see overtly that's under the control of the CCP. What we don't see is what's happening in India, what's happening in your country, what's happening in my country, where they've taken over the Chinese language media globally. And how do they do that? They threaten those they go on the Chinese media. They buy them out. Through various ways, they force out those who are critics of China, and then they put pro-Chinese or Chinese Communist Party owners in front of that diaspora media, say in the Solomon Islands, which again another failure of the Biden administration. It's basically China has bypassed the first and second island chain and now has potential basing of PLA forces in the Pacific Island nations. Several nations are signing agreements, particularly the Solomon Islands. Political defeat, but the United States government has basically ignored the Pacific Islands in the recent years. And even though presidents of, say, the Marshall Islands, again, Cleo has written extensively about this, presidents of nations down there have written for help from the United States. The Biden administration did not give it to them. It's been a bipartisan problem going back some years, but we have not supported many democracies that we needed to have supported in their fight. And so the media, getting back to the media, it's the Chinese diaspora media globally. Then they buy or they write agreements with news media in Brazil. They buy in Africa, in Europe, in Canada, in Mexico. And so what they're doing is news media that appear to be Canadian, news media that appear to be from India. They're basically running tear sheets off of Xinhua. They're it's PLA Daily sometimes. They run as if it's a local writer who wrote it. Well, people in India, if it's a local news media, you give it more credibility than Chinese news media. But it's the Chinese narrative that our own news media is feeding us. This it gets even more complicated with the recent election, with the election of Donald Trump. There's an antipathy in most of the left-leaning Democratic Party aligned news media, and that's the majority of news media in America. It's called Trump derangement syndrome. How does that manifest itself? Today, for example, Associated Press ran an article that basically blamed Donald Trump for, I mean, it took the PRC narrative, and it blamed Donald Trump for all the stress, all the tensions with poor, abused People's Republic of China. And so you see how that works. That may not have been instigated by the PRC, but political antipathy within my country drives coverage in a way that's pro CCP, anti-American, and then serves to undermine, without fact. It's a nonsense story if you read it or when you read it. It's an absolute nonsense story, sprinkled with a few facts, but it's all designed to undermine politically, not necessarily under the control of the CCP, but folks who are supporting it. Academia, same thing. We have academia infiltrated in the Department of Defense in America. We had a dean at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies who had been very high up in the National Defense University, destroying the careers of so-called China hawks in the process, who were working their way up in American academia, blocking them. But he was a spy for China, and eventually got caught and prosecuted. The same thing is happening in Harvard. The same thing is happening. You can go into our counterintelligence database and you can see how many professors were prosecuting. It's nowhere near the number of people who are collaborating. So that academic infiltration and the infiltration by students coming in from China who are reporting on other Chinese students and acting as United Front Work Department agents, that's all part of the infiltration that the Trump administration tried to stop during the short time it was in, and that the Biden administration ended all those programs.
So, how do you think? I mean, I think we have got around 8, 9 minutes left for the meeting. So, the thing is
Mhm.
that how do you think Trump administration returning is going to correct the situation, and how can US and India collaborate to ensure that this political warfare can be countered?
India's pretty good at it. You understand the situation. You're on the front line. You got soldiers being killed um, by the Chinese, and so you understand the situation better. There's a couple of steps that need to be taken. One, you need to acknowledge the problem. America needs to wake up and call it political warfare again, which it will under the Trump administration. It's not going to be a silly strategic communication or a pacing threat, a pacing challenge, not a pacing threat. Um, we're going to name it right. You don't need a Chinese philosopher to tell you from India, me from America, that if you don't get the terminology right, if you don't properly identify the threat, no way you can fight it. Okay, so first and foremost, call it political warfare. That's what George Kennan did for the U.S. State Department in the first Cold War, and that's how we ended up beating the Soviet Union. He identified what political warfare was, defined it for President Truman. President Eisenhower picked up his efforts and put it on steroids, and ultimately, in a bipartisan basis, which we need in America, a lot more of that, um, we were able to defeat the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So you need to identify it, use the right terminology. Then you have to come up with a strategy. There is no whole of government approach to this threat. There's no recognition. No one is leading it. The National Security Council, in the absence of a cognizant president of the United States and an engaged vice president, it should have been up to the National Security Council to take on this challenge. Jake Sullivan did not do that. And so what will happen under the Biden or the Trump administration is you have people who know what to do in terms of getting a strategy going. It may take a little while, but that will be in conjunction with India, like-minded friends and allies who are under the same threat, can share that experience. We have to train our investigators. It's not a military issue here. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's a law enforcement and prosecution effort. We have to systematically train our people how to detect it and then how to prosecute it. And then we have to have active measures, which you don't have much of in the U.S. We have to go after them. We're not just waiting for them to attack. U.S. right now, sure, we'll prosecute someone for espionage. We'll prosecute someone not effectively for illegal influence, trying to set up a separate nation within the Republic of the Marshall Islands, for example, or something like that, setting up a proxy nation for the People's Republic of China within RMI. Um, that's whack-a-mole, Joyeeta. It's not systematic. So we have a strategy. We train our people how to implement the strategy. We resource, and then we move on. India and America, why don't you set up the regional center of excellence that we need? We have to confront and defeat China's political warfare. We have centers of excellence for a lot of things, biomedical issues. We have centers of excellence for regional studies. Why not one specifically, India, with you in the lead, a regional center of excellence where we bring together people from Taiwan, we bring together people from the Philippines, we bring together the experts and the many experts you have in India, and work together to identify what's happening globally. Europe has two of these centers, okay? Why can't Asia? Why can't the Indo-Pacific region have it? India should lead that. You have the vision, you have the intellect, you have the experience. You should also tell America when we are wrong. Follow me? It's
Yes.
not okay. Be nice to Blinken because he flew all the way over here. It's not be nice to Sullivan. It's hey, we're in an existential war against a genocidal totalitarian regime that wants global hegemony at our expense and then the expense of democracy globally. How about calling it what it is, United States of America government representative? How about getting in the fight with us instead of pretending it doesn't exist? No more willful disregard of the obvious that is going on in front of you. Get in the fight. If our allies and friends say that forcefully to the current administration, which fortunately won't be in power much longer, but the Trump administration, which would benefit from that reinforcement, then we will have effective collaboration. Don't be
Right.
nice. Be
That's
forceful.
nice.
It's your children. It's all of our children's future that's at stake. No one wants their children to grow up under the jackboot of a mass murdering, genocidal, totalitarian regime of the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. So you to help us with that.
Sure, sure. And I must tell viewers that Professor Gershaneck has a wonderful book. In fact, I have gone through that. On China's political warfare, and it's absolutely a brilliant book. But I think readers can get a free copy of that book as well.
Absolutely. Just go to Marine Corps University Press. The Chinese, incidentally, are selling bootleg copies of it, which might be modified. Don't buy it from Amazon. It is free.
Okay.
Because you're
Wonderful. And
Joyeeta's listeners get it for free. Download it from Marine Corps University Press. Just punch in political warfare, Marine Corps University Press. You can download a PDF for free. And for those education institutions and government organizations in India, you can go work via your Marine attaché or your military attaché, and they'll get you hard copies from Marine Corps University Press. It is free.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gershaneck, for coming on this show. It was a delight speaking to you. You should write for us. It's an open invitation to you whenever you want to.
I would stand among giants when I stand next to you and Cleo, but that's an honor. Thank you.
Whatever, that's too much. You're too kind. You're too kind. And the thing is, thank you for coming on this show. And thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.